The president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, elected in 2010, succeeded President Álvaro Uribe Vélez, who led the country from 2002 to 2010. During those years, Colombia flourished in every area, thanks to the Uribe administration's firm policy against the FARC and the ELN, illegally armed groups currently designed as terrorist organizations both by the United States and the European Union. The gross national product grew from $98 billion in 2001 to $287 billion in 2010. The homicide rate, at 64 homicides per 100,000 people in 2001, dropped to 34 by 2010. In 2001, 3,050 people were kidnapped, compared to 280 people kidnapped in 2010, 11 times fewer. Illegal roadblocks fell from 596 in 2001 to 12 in 2010. Terrorist attacks on the petroleum industry's infrastructure fell from 261 to 31. Santos was Uribe's defense minister and made campaign promises to continue his policies, but as soon as he assumed the presidency, his attitude changed. He met instead with Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez and allied himself with Cuba's totalitarian regime and its satellites in the region. Santos' betrayal of the electorate continued, and he initiated so-called peace negotiations with the narco-terrorist group FARC, which have only served to strengthen the terrorist organization. In 2010, there were 1,335 reported cases of extortion. By 2013, they rose to 4,805. In 2010, there were 472 acts of terrorism. In 2013, there were 890. There were 31 attacks on the petroleum industry's infrastructure in 2010. In 2013, there were 259. The FARC export hundreds of tons of cocaine to Venezuela and Mexico every year. Their partners in the Sinaloa and other cartels transport the cocaine to the United States and to Africa, where it is exchanged for weapons with Al-Qaeda and distributed throughout Europe. Between 2013 and 2014, cocaine production in Colombia increased by more than 40%, a consequence of the government's policies to suspend aerial eradication programs and to allow FARC terrorists to return to the areas of the country from which they had been expelled by the Colombian military. Meanwhile, their drug-generated fortunes are being laundered through the so-called peace talks being held in Havana. Santos has done away with the government's division of powers. The Justice Department and the courts have become agents of the presidency, used to judicially persecute Santos' critics and rivals. This is the case, for example, with Ricardo Puentes Melo, a journalist currently persecuted for having uncovered judicial fraud. Every significant politician allied with Uribe, as well as Uribe's own family, has been a victim of judicial persecution. Many have been imprisoned, others are in exile. This judicial persecution has extended also to members of the military that effectively confronted the FARC's terrorist and narcotics operations. But persecution is not limited to the legal realm. All the important journalists who have been critical of Santos have lost their jobs. And Fernando Londoño, a radio talk show host and former government minister, was the victim of an assassination attempt when unknown assailants bombed his car. The crime remains unsolved. Countless people have been assassinated across the country for opposing the terrorists and the government. This so-called peace is the triumph of those who have recruited tens of thousands of children into their ranks by force, who have systematically raped and used girls as sex slaves and then forced them to abort, who have maimed thousands of innocent people with landmines, who have assassinated some 200,000 people, who have kidnapped 16,000 people, and who have destroyed the environment, bombing petroleum infrastructure in order to extort oil companies. What Santos has done with his so-called peace is to instill terror in the population, going so far as to make public appearances asking a mother if she would lend her children for war.
¿Y usted prestaría sus hijos para la guerra?
Through Santos' definition of peace, it can be said that the Colombian government has become an element of a criminal organization. This so-called peace presupposes the political legitimacy of all terrorist atrocities, and the agreements reached so far would place lawful citizens in the terrorist's debt. The only possible outcome of the negotiation is the seizing of power by the FARC, adding the strategically placed country to the cocaine empire of Cuba's Castro brothers and Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro. And while Colombia falls to its ruin, its economy stalls. The Colombian peso is worth half what it was 2 years ago. Soon there will be rationing of electricity. Foreign investors are fleeing, and corruption has reached unprecedented levels. Santos has squandered the wealth of what was a booming economy, spending billions of dollars of public funds on propaganda and buying support for his deal with organized crime.
I want to congratulate President Santos on his extraordinary efforts to bring about an end to a conflict that has plagued Colombia for too long. The United States is very proud to support that effort.
The Obama administration has applauded this perversion of peace and spent millions of US tax dollars to support it, because most Americans don't understand the deal and because by supporting the so-called peace deal, he receives favorable treatment from the international left and the liberal media. As a result, the United States will end up supporting the surrender of Colombia to a band of murderers who, from their seat of power, will be able to commit acts of genocide at a much larger scale than they have already.